Hey, good morning, everyone. Glad to greet you and glad to see everybody's smiling faces.
Good enthusiasm.
Great enthusiasm.
Carnival down
It's the Festival of the Horse.
Festival of the Horse brings out the best in all of Georgetown.
Especially when you're trying to park.
Especially when you're trying to park. But no, we are glad to have you here. It is September 6th, and this is a work session for the Scott County Fiscal Court. So we have several guests, and we have several items to discuss. A lot of good things going on here in Scott County. This is the Festival of the Horse weekend, and there'll be a parade tonight and then a parade tomorrow at 5, and all kinds of vendors and food and such. So a big weekend. With that said, I'd like to ask if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to recognize we have Rick Hostetler and Chad Wallace joining us virtually via Zoom. So we've got a good turnout here today. We will start this morning, and I'm going to ask Rhett Shirley. Good morning, Rhett. If you would present to the court information related to the zone change requests, and just give a brief summary, feedback from the Planning Commission, and then the court can ask any questions, and then we have John Woodall and Tyler Gomez with Country Boy. They are here if you all would like to address the court as well. But Rhett, thank you for being with us. Appreciate your time.
Sure. Be gentle. This is the first time I've been before you gentlemen.
No.
I spoke to most of y'all throughout my short life so far. But again, you'd like to start, I presume, with the Country Boy Highview zone change?
That would be great.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody knows that facility has long-standing commercial use, even though essentially everything around it is zoned A1. It's been zoned B2 for quite some time, as it was essentially brought into compliance in the 80s as zoning moved through the county. These gentlemen, and potentially some ladies, are seeking to move this zone from B2 to B5. That would allow them to utilize the facility for their concept. Again, we'll speak to the concept, but of course we're really looking at just the zone change and what it can be now and in the future, presuming that these folks didn't continue on tomorrow, 10, 20 years from now. In general, their concept is a micro distillery. B5 allows for some of what we call light industrial, which that plays into food processing, packaging, things of that nature. Retail that needs a lot of storage, which these folks obviously will need for their operation. Now, B5 also speaks to what we call general commercial park, which, given the context of this area being so contained, regardless if these folks are there or not, unless they were to acquire additional land, expansion into something of that scale is highly unlikely. So essentially, that's the gist of it. Of course, if they continue having approvals, they'll have to move forward with a development plan. Specifically, the state will be addressing parking, entrance and exit, as it is a state road. Be working a lot with the state in that scenario. If y'all are familiar with that parking lot, it's not the best. We've had some brief discussions about that, as well as zone changes typically require an immediate screening from areas, specifically if you adjoin agricultural zones, whether those are fencing, tree plantings, hedges, et cetera, and there's a lot of considerations with that. We did a site visit Wednesday morning to kind of start looking at those scenarios, see what they may be looking at, assuming they continue through the approvals and onto a development plan process. So they're aware of some of the things they may need to do immediately, some different options they have to accomplish those goals as far as separation, screening, delineation, and also the parking and the processes and things they need to do with that. Those are the two big things that would be immediately associated with the zone change and development plan to address separation and safety. The rest of the development plan will be driven by their concept as they move forward. But we're not to that point yet. Not to dwell too much on their concept. Again, B5 doesn't allow some of the more intensive uses you would see in a highway commercial, which, drive-throughs, restaurants, things of that nature, gas stations. I believe at one point in its life, that property was a truck stop, which is probably why it had the B2 to begin with. But again, B5 can sound like an upzoning. However, in this context, it is a little more limiting as it doesn't allow for some of those high traffic functions, again, gas station, things of that nature. So if y'all require any more information, I've got all the stuff with me, or Mr. John Woodall and Tyler Gomez are here as well.
The staff recommendation was for approval.
Yes, sir.
And the planning commission vote was
Approval. Yes, sir.
approval. What questions does anyone have from the court related to this proposal and request?
Brett, you mentioned it going to B5, and then you said in years later, if it changed or whatever, it'd have to look at zone change again. Is that what you said?
No, just trying to, of course, we like to speak to concept to a point with zone change process just to show intent and good intentions, of course, and what they, in the short term. But when we're talking about zone changes, we have to consider the now and down the road, is all I'm getting at. We're not talking another zone change again, just if these folks were to not, say if they were to sell immediately or 20 years down the road they move out, what could it be at that time? So, and again, there's a short list of uses that could be appropriate, but it generally is, it relies more so on design standards, traffic flow, pedestrian considerations, things of that nature, which again, when you hear general commercial park, it sounds like shopping center. While on a grander scale, sure, maybe it could allow for that, but with the unique circumstances of this site being just under an acre, I believe, and the juxtaposition with the state road, this zone actually provides more design standards and considerations than, say, B2 does.
So just for an instance, if they decide not to do it, what could go there if we do it with B5?
Let's see, let me get through here too. Essentially, it discourages, I'll start with what it kind of discourages. It discourages strip development, things of that nature. It does encourage clustering of commercial activities to design or to encourage connectivity, pedestrian safety, park and walk type scenarios. Let's see here. Again, it encourages an orderly and systematic development to get away from sprawl and strip mall type things, so you wouldn't see that like you do in some of our B2 sections. It does allow for a mixing of limited light industrial compatible with commercial uses. Again, when we say that, it's generally food packaging and processing. It even speaks to laboratory and research, which to me kind of is appropriate for distilling. Let's see, some of the things it also allows for is stuff that's permitted in B4, which is again design standard and controlled retail and mixed use, things of that nature. Let's see here, what else do we have? Electrical and appliance and equipment assembly, again, with the nature of this site, more than likely not. Instrument and meter manufacturing, sports good manufacturing. Again, B5 essentially lies a lot in context and suitability. While there is an extensive list of uses it could be, planning and zoning and yourselves and whoever the governing bodies may be for the particular area takes a look at things individually based on development plan and suitability for the area. Other things it could be professional offices, lawyers, architects, engineers, hotel, motel. Again, being on a state road especially, a lot of considerations would go into a development plan of any sort.
And again, we're talking 1 acre.
Yes.
And the surrounding acres, what are they?
Well, to the north and south, there's 2 driveways that serve residences that are back off the road. I believe these gentlemen have engaged conversations with the folks where their driveway lies to the north and the properties back to the east. Just trying to be good neighbors of, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we may require to separate ourselves from you. How do you all feel about that? That sort of thing. Again, B5 is very contextual. It's obvious that this property has unique circumstances and limitations. It's kind of a funny shaped area where US 25 had shifted from the east down to the west. In fact, the old roadbed runs behind the property and delineates them from others. In fact, I believe they're engaging a surveyor to establish exactly who owns that abandoned roadbed to see where the delineation will occur and what they may need to do to complement or supplement that.
But long-term use in that site, it's not like it's something new.
Right.
It's
right.
been a long time.
Yes, sir. Given the historical context and long-term commercial use of the property, it allows a good local, somewhat established business to continue use of what I'll refer to as a historic property for the county. I'm sure yourselves and most other people are aware that it's been, essentially a staple of the northern Scott County community for decades. I know they've spoken with the family as well about their intentions. They can speak more to that. Excuse me. But again, it allows for controlled, good, locally owned continued commercial use of a property that has a history of such.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I appreciate the conversation. Rick can't probably hear me. I appreciate the conversation about what it could be if they left, because we did not have that conversation with the Bevins property when the John Deere dealership was built there. And my concern with what it could be is if it ever left, it could be a car dealership. There's so many other things it could be. And we have to look at what could happen. And I think that, you know, this is such a small piece of property and such a defined of what you could put on there that would fit on there that, you know, I'm glad we're having the conversations of what it could be.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of what I was leading up to. Once you put that designation of that B5 on there, it's there. Unless somebody comes and changes it, it's there, which is rare that it'll get changed.
Right, and beyond the zone change, saying if it were established, worst case scenario, tomorrow, 10 years, 50 years, this operation no longer exists, every single application that comes before, after the zone change for a change of use is subject to a development plan. Again, very strict considerations for that before planning and zoning, even internally before. You know, it's not uncommon for people to bring us concept plans and seek our advice. And, you know, at that point, we take a good look at the zone, what it means, what it says, context of the site, and move forward.
So the transportation piece is probably going to be the toughest of this site, right? Is dealing with state transportation.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, being a state road, ingress, egress is, you know, safety is paramount.
Sure.
You know, I'm sure
Turning
you guys,
left out
many
of
of
there.
y'all may have been in that parking lot or on that stretch of road. Again, on the site visit, I mean, we stood in the parking lot and, you know, here comes another, and we were like, you know, here's some ideas that you may use to, you know, promote better safety, parking, comings and goings, and where you may expand to. But again, that's going to be a conversation mostly driven by the state, Ben Krebs, things of that nature. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a quick, this is
Ryan?
kind of off this topic, but something David just brought up. Is there any provisions in the law that would allow for, you know, hey, we think that Bevins, you know, any property, we think that Bevins is a good use for this, but if Bevins ever leaves, that the zone would revert back, or the new owner would have to apply for a zone change before the board to stop what you're talking about happening? Because I've heard this quite a bit, and I've heard what you said. I just didn't know if there's any provisions that would allow for that to ever happen. Like, hey, we're approving this, and I know we're getting off the country boy stuff, but we would have, you know. Do you get what I'm asking?
Yes.
Elise, do you want to assist Rhett? I take it.
I didn't know if she was stretching.
Yeah, like
I was just going to respectfully.
I didn't know if she was coming to take him out or something.
There's so much.
And I just want to clarify. In every zone change we've had the same conversation. You know, what could it be in the future? So is there a provision that prevents, you know, hey, we think Bevins is a good spot, but not for a car dealership. So if Bevins leaves, it has to revert back, or I don't know what the options are.
Yeah, so the most recent one that I can really think of is the distillery off of Payne's Depot in McClellan Circle, where conditions of their approval by the Planning Commission board stated that if this was not the user, or if they didn't execute this within a certain period of time, it would immediately, or it would revert back to the initial zone that it was, which would be the A1. In this instance, if we did like some type of reversion clause, it would revert back to its existing zone that it is right now, which would be a combination of B2 and A1. So it kind of doesn't exactly eliminate the potential of commercial activity on the property unless we required a complete downzoning to the A1 for all of the property, not just the property that's already A1 zone properties.
So it
once-
sounds like
once-
you're saying you can put revisions in there.
But
But
can
that doesn't solve the problem
can you
that you're getting at.
Yeah, but can you have a revert back for if they sell it? So in any property, I don't want to pick on these two properties. Like, right, like I buy a property, we get a zone change, I sell it, and then somebody comes in and does something that wasn't intended. Can that revert back after the sale?
I would likely say that that's not really a possibility. They would have to apply forward and go from there. I'm not super familiar, and Cam, I may point to you on this one, if we've ever had an instance where we've had a zone and a by right use or conditional use is out overtly pulled from it as part of an approval by the legislative body.
I'd make a comment on it. I think we'd be in a lawsuit potentially, because if they go to sell that property, they're going to have a new owner come to this court, ask for a zone change, to either keep it the way it is, and if we say no, then we're killing the value of that property possibly for them.
That's the challenge.
Just my experience on the planning zoning, there would be people apply that already made a deal to sell it, but they were doing the application to get it changed. The deal was already made to sell it once it was done.
Yeah.
So that would be a hard thing to fight.
That's
I
very
think.
contingent
Yeah.
on.
So,
Exactly.
but
It's very
I was gonna
particular
ask
spot
too,
zoning type.
when I was on there, we came up with a thing called a sunset clause. 2 years you had to develop that property. If it didn't, it always went back, but I don't know if that applies
It-
to the zone
it
change.
does
I think it
not.
just
It
goes to the
applies just-
development plan.
But I still don't think it stops the problem that we keep talking about is, you know, a property has one intention, but if it ever sells, then it could completely change the landscape of that area in an unintended way. So could we prevent that from happening? Is what I'm really
I
getting
think
at.
Rhett did mention it. If somebody did use it for something other than what the application's made for, they have to do another development plan.
Right, the development plan is
to make
still
it what
The
they
change of owner,
require.
change
But
of
that
use
doesn't
would
mean-
necessitate, yes, sir.
We can condition uses as well. I mean, that the property could be used for a car lot, or whatever the conditions, the uses are that you're worried about. That, the applicant can agree to that, and if somebody buys the property there, they buy the property with notice of those conditions. That's a different story than,
It's a little bit more of a private contract agreement where it's like it functions as a deed restriction like an HOA's monitoring you.
Gotcha.
And so when you buy it, you get your deed, it's saying, okay, instead of saying no houses under 2,000 square feet, no used car lots, no car lots outright, no gas stations, something of that thing. That's more of a private agreement that they can put in that's more stable there for us.
we can
They can choose to make it happen that way.
And I'm not looking for anything for this property. I was just saying that I like the idea that we're talking about what it could be, because that's the concern.
And I didn't know it was
20
going to bring up
years
this
from
much
now.
conversation on it.
Yeah.
But I
Me
will
neither.
say, I am glad that somebody's going to do something with that property, because to me, it's historical for Scott County, being an old truck stop, and
Yeah.
to keep it alive is just awesome to me. So
Yeah.
I'm glad y'all doing it.
Anything else on this request? And we will bring an ordinance. Rick Hostetler, virtually. Rick, you're muted.
All those words was.
A first-time caller.
Long-time listener.
Long time listener.
Rick, we can't hear you.
They're working on it.
Yeah.
Still can't hear you.
Can you use the chat?
Type it out.
Use the
Yeah.
chat.
You're just gonna call us now. Hold it up to the mic.
Does he know sign language?
I think that would be a good one.
Do we?
Oh, that's also a very good question.
That's gonna happen.
Oh,
Even better.
Hey, Judge.
All right, I've got you on speakerphone here at court.
Okay. Sorry about it. It says I was unmuted I'm on my phone. Two things. One of them that hasn't been brought up, and one of them that has. I'll go with the first one that has. I was at the planning and zoning meeting when they heard this application, and there was at least one citizen that was concerned about traffic flow there, and I wanted to bring that up. And it is a unique spot, but it's not unlike many places in Scott County. There is a hill there, and it's a fair amount of traffic at any given time of the day. So that's a concern, and I think Rhett already brought that out, and I appreciate that. The other concern was I'm thinking back to the Dollar General store about sewage access, and I believe there's sewage access, but I don't think that, and I think that they would be required to tap onto that if that's available. But if I'm not mistaken, and Judge, we've had a lot of conversations about this. I think they're at capacity. I just wanted to bring that up because there was a lot of hoops to jump through when the Dollar General store came. But the Dollar General store was prepared to do a septic system on their property, and I know that Highview already had, the former Highview already has sewage or septic system, and it's a working septic system. I'm sure it's working because the slaughterhouse, I'm sure, generates a lot a lot of water and that has to be treated. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that up because that was an issue on another piece of property. It's kind of similar to what we're talking about with, like David brought up about the Bevins property. High Views is a huge history there. I've used it many times through the years, but they're no longer the owners, and that could be the same thing in a few years or whatever for Country Boy. So that's kind of my comments.
So to ask Brett and Elise, if in the future sewage capacity to public sewer was accessible, would they be required to tie on? I think that's Rick's question. And then currently, we just received back in the spring $1.75 million from the community funding program from Congressman Barr, and GMWSS is going to use those funds to design and develop a plan to address those capacity issues. That whole issue has a $30 million plus or minus price tag, and that'll be a long process. But to answer that question, could you all?
The property is currently on septic, and if there's any concerns about immediate use and concept, I'll yield some time to these gentlemen here. They're very well educated and willing to kind of speak to their use. And Elise can confirm direct requirement for sewer would that be contingent on annexation?
It typically is like an annexation thing. Sewer is usually available, or when we design our USPs, that considers the sewage capacity or the ability for that to be served. And this is outside the urban service boundary. So by our subdivision requirements, we would not explicitly require them to tag in, but they could opt in if Georgetown Municipal had a capacity.
If it was available.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's the line that goes up 25.
Yeah.
So
City
there's
limits
something
ends
there.
at the interstate interchange and slightly up Porter.
So if it was an empty lot currently, and it was zoned A1 or whatever, and they were applying for this, would you require city sewer tie-in at that time?
It would be evaluated based on health department standards for suitability of lagoon or septic. Again, without being inside the urban service boundary or up for annexation, given the distance to current city limits. Again, that's up Porter Road. It would not necessarily be required, but it's not uncommon for in zone changes for applicants to say, hey, if it were to ever become available, or if we were ever,
Well, I think it was
allowable for
anything under
annexation.
5 acres had to be tied in. If it's outside the urban, I think that's
Not
correct.
necessarily, because we do have cluster lots and things of that nature, that are, allowable by algebra and ratio to be under 5 acres, and pre-existing lots out in the county that are unincorporated that are on septic or lagoon. For
Right.
example,
I think
like Victoria
grandfathered
Estates.
in, but I
Yes.
think the discussions we've had here in the past is if it was under 5 acres, then it had to be on the city sewer. If it was not in the.
They want to be on sewer, right? They're trying to get on sewer. They're being told that they
May we
can't-
yield some to these folks,
like
please?
they're being told they can't get on sewer because there's no
Tell them
capacity.
never asked them.
No, they want to be on sewer. They're trying to get on sewer. There's no capacity.
Preference.
But there's no capacity.
There's no
You and I have
capacity.
talked about the process and how much you intend to use.
Yeah, so while I would like to be able to hook up onto the sewer, it is not quite as damaging as it might be, as our process is, as Brett mentioned before, we're going to be a very small micro distillery. What we're going to be doing as a product will be mostly gin and vodka, and what will be coming off that still, it's a very small 100-gallon still, so I'm going to rip that alcohol out. All that should be left is just water. Otherwise, I am doing a very bad job. So we don't want to be sending too much stuff out. So if it's just really just left hot water, cooled water going into the septic, that's not that bad. However, I have plans, for growth and all that other stuff. So we would like to be able to utilize the sewer if we can. So that's my piece.
But it not being in the urban service boundary is the difference in a recent case that we had a few years ago. And it's,
I don't know what to
yeah.
say, but that's okay. We wouldn't require it. We would always defer to water and sewer and the health department. We have seen stuff go on septic systems before that are undersized, and even with a more intense use as opposed to a traditional ag use. So we'd obviously kind of discuss that at the development plan phase, but they've expressed interest in.
Well, I just think it's definitely worth discussing because if and we keep talking about what it potentially could be in the future, And that's always a concern of ours. And if it turns into something that's a lot more commercial use with a lot more sewage and water needs, that could present a problem on that lot.
I know I keep kind of harping on this, but again, a change of use or a different concept would be beholden to a development plan, at which time all that goes through technical review committee. I'm sure y'all are very familiar with that. Georgetown Municipal Water and Sewer, as well as the health department, sit on that board.
Right.
All right.
And I don't have a problem with it. We've had that, I guess, where it has to be, if it's under 5 acres, and maybe we're grandfathering it in, but it's just something to pay attention to.
Yes, sir.
With that said, there was one other, if there's no other questions about this concept, the plan is to have an ordinance prepared for a first reading next Friday and have a first reading for that.
Yeah.
So Cam will have that ready. Is there another request that you all wanted to cover as well?
The zone changes?
Yes.
Yes, sir. This one actually,
Rick, I'm gonna let you go.
It's 1081 Stamping Ground Road. It's just there before Betsy Way. I'm sure Mr. Ellison and a number of y'all drive past it all the time. It's just before that S-curve. It is a residential lot currently, actual zoning being R1B. However, these folks were seeking to change it to B1, which is in general kind of a neighborhood commercial district. Again, kind of park and walk, small convenience store, professional services, things meant to serve the community. Again, this is probably our most restrictive business zone, depending on how you look at it. I keep using the example of gas station. It can never be a gas station or a Hardee's or a McDonald's, something of that nature, or a strip mall. Again, trying not to get too much into concept, but these folks were seeking to use it as essentially a storage and small showroom and meeting space for a independent contractor business. There are 3 or 4 B1 zone properties, both to the east and west, or no, that'd be north and south, excuse me, over there that are, again, I believe that vet clinic is B1. Across the street, an associated kennel is B1. Across the bridge is another contractor's business that's B1 as well. So it's not necessarily uncommon for the area. However, it being a long-term residential use, sitting there in that S-curve near school uses, those were the main concerns of that application. And also, as far as future land use goes, that area is projected to be what we call quasi-public use, which is generally governmental offices, park space, schools, libraries, things of that nature. And I'm sure that designation was given its proximity to both Great Crossing Park, the schools. There's a church next door as well, which would also be suitable for quasi-public. But the main concerns from the general public and staff were essentially traffic. That lot is up on a terrace, so they're already facing challenges being a state road, essentially Stamping Ground Road right there, as far as entrance access parking. Again, the size and scale of the operation, we have a metric for parking, which they would easily be able to meet on the lot, being 1/3 of an acre, and they've already got a metal building on the property. However, that entrance access, I believe it gains 6 to 8 feet, depending on where you're standing on the lot from the roadbed to the lot. That entrance would be a challenge as well. They did submit, justification that, this particular use, again, trying to stay away as much as possible from concept, but it's hard to. That their use being a small contractor business could be justified as, a neighborhood provider. And again, there's a contractor's office across the bridge for context. Business uses in general are pretty uncommon in the area until you get further into Stamping Ground proper. There are some conditional uses in the area, specifically such as Combs Welding, but again, that's not a rezone, that's a conditional use. Now, as far as the future land use designation goes, allowable uses in B1 can also fall into quasi-public use. Again, B1 would allow for small governmental office, library, maybe the school board or the county would want to put a office or extension for the schools there, whether a sheriff or a police officer. This is another circumstance of the size of the lot is a limiter. It's just about 1/3 of an acre. B1 could allow for some quasi-public uses, in short. But those were the general concerns with the application as voiced by both staff and the community. There were some adjoining neighbors that had concerns with traffic coming and going, and I've lived in this area for however long, and it's always been a house. are the general concerns with the
So this
application.
is, it's directly adjacent to the Great Cross.
Yes, sir. It essentially
Baptist
adjoins.
Church.
Yes.
Right
And,
behind it.
yes. It's actually, it joins the lot.
Put the fill in there out of the curb?
Yes. Yeah. They've
No, no,
actually,
no,
yeah,
No,
they
no,
did
no,
some,
no.
On the other
It's,
side.
it's right
On
next to
other
the
side of
church.
right next to,
Right
yeah.
by the grave, right by the cemetery.
I thought you were speaking of, they kind of done some grading and I believe driveway improvement because they bought it, assuming, again, I don't want to put words, in these folks' mouth, but the way staff understood it, it was bought thinking they were going to use it for a residence, decided it was undersized, figured they would use it for their business, seek a rezoning. They're not eligible for conditional use, for like home occupation because they don't live there. Otherwise, maybe that would have been the direction this application went. There is a manufactured building on site. They have done some grading and improvements, but to your point, they do adjoin the church, which I believe is zoned A1. So if this zone change were approved at this phase or further, they would also be beholden to some of those screening requirements that I spoke briefly about for Highview. Anything that adjoins Ag Zone is pretty strictly enforced as far as screening and separation goes.
The planning commission vote was to deny,
Yes, sir.
and the staff recommendation was,
We recommended approval essentially on the grounds that B1 could allow for some future quasi-public uses and that, again, trying to stay so much away from initial concept, that this idea, put before us would be low impact. B1 would limit further, greater business impact to the area. And being that there were a handful of B1 uses along the same corridor, staff concluded that it wasn't necessarily contradictory to the area and could potentially encourage further commercial growth in that area, which the comprehensive plan does speak to, small, locally owned, more diverse businesses. To be honest, Judge, yes, it was somewhat of a tightrope, given the nature of the area being mostly residential, the traffic and safety, adjoining schools and churches. So,
the planning commission denied. Our options,
Yeah,
Okay.
this is kind of like, are they wanting to appeal the denial?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So we had one of these a few weeks ago. Yeah. Yeah, so it'd be similar to that. I mean, there's a statute that says what you have to hang your hat on if you want to go against what the planning commission did. And I have that in front of me, but it's the 100.213. So before any map amendment is granted, so if we want to amend it, the legislative body or fiscal court must find that the map agreement is either in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan, or in the absence of such finding that one or more of the following apply. One, that the existing zoning classification given to the property is inappropriate and that the proposed zoning classification is appropriate. Or B, that there have been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature within the area involved which were not anticipated in the adopted comprehensive plan and which have substantially altered the basic character of such area. So like if you want to go against how they voted, you have to hang your hat on one of those. But I guess they can.
But you to that effect, the way it's labeled in the comp plan would allow it, right?
Would allow for a potential zone change to this. If we're speaking just
Sound like this is
proposed
what
future
they
land
said.
use, proposed future land use being quasi-public, B1 itself would allow for those. This initial concept, I'm sorry I have to speak to it again, does not necessarily fall in the line of quasi-public use. Their proposed use does fall in line with B1. But again, if these folks were to sell off down the road and, an obvious adjoiner being the church, schools, parkland, or again, services in the corridor that would complement as such, B1 would allow for that. However, I believe most of the concern with the community and, staff, we do have to consider what their immediate intentions are. And the community essentially voiced concerns of having a business that doesn't necessarily complement the neighborhood being a contractor, storage, and potential showroom facility.
So like what would we hang our hat on? Like, cause like you're talking about a private business, so it's not for what doesn't really fit the comp plan. And I mean, there hadn't been any economic growth in that area that
Right.
would change it. So like, I don't really know, cause we're kind of, tied up by this ordinance or by the statute. So I don't really know what we would even.
what I would like to recommend is CAM review and then maybe give us a draft memo.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that okay, Cam?
Sure, and I think, just like in the other case, if any, I think we talked about this before that one too, if anybody feels inclined to consider the, I guess, appeal, then you have to have a public hearing and publish notice of that. So, I mean, I can send out a memo and y'all can decide what you want to do. I think if you don't do anything, then what the Planning Commission did stays in effect.
The applicant does anticipate, an audience with you all. We have not fully submitted all the things for that process. Essentially, we're waiting on certified minutes from the last meeting to be signed off at the next session. That way we have a complete official record.
So you'll send over a transmittal after you certify the minutes from your last
Yes, we just
meeting.
want to make, being that this is more of an appeal, we want to make sure that everything is official. That way the record stands as it is. They've got a 90-day window, I believe.
So that's why we will not take this up on Friday.
Right, do you know what the
We'll
vote
wait
was?
for the minutes.
Vote, let me see, I've got the unofficial minutes here.
Yeah, unofficially.
Yeah.
Do you know
Let's see
the
here.
unofficial vote from the Planning Commission?
This one was, here we are. 4-2, dissenting, deny.
So if you want, like, once we receive that from y'all, I can send something out to
Yes.
the court and say, hey, here's the
I
office.
think we just push pause until we get the official minutes.
Okay, I'll advise the applicants of that again. Essentially, once, these minutes and things are finalized and we send over everything to you all, it's kind of out of our hands and it'll be applicant driven at that point for consideration of you all.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Cam Culbertson to talk to you all about a draft resolution that we have discussed in the past about
Thank you.
county attorney's office and reimbursement.
Yeah, so as you all probably recall, back in May, the issue was raised about our office having a policy, which I support, for, some of our attorneys do a little bit of private practice work kind of on the side. That is something that is authorized by statute to do. But, I think we need a policy in place that, one, emphasizes that certainly the duty to the counties first and foremost, and so you are prohibited from doing any private practice work that interferes with that or conflicts with that. And then two, I believe, and I think the consensus was that there needs to be a policy to reimburse the county for any time that that myself or any assistant county attorney spends in their office doing any private practice work. So spent some time trying to come up with a fair policy. So basically where we went with this is, Joe Pat suggested, and I agree, that I contacted Mike Hawkinsmith's agency just to get an appraisal, like what is the square footage rental value of our office space. And in the attachment I've handed out, he gave me a write-up on August 9th that the square foot value of the building is $12 per square foot. And he already had a bunch of numbers, I think, for local business, buildings in the area. So I don't think he had to spend do a ton of work because he already had a lot of data on that. But that doesn't include utilities. So I got the utility information from Michelle Ray. What does it cost to do utilities on the building for the month? And then, how many square foot are in the building? And so I think that came out to about 64 cents per square foot for utilities. So, I can go into this a little bit more, but, I didn't go to law school, guys, because I'm good at math. I'll say that first of all. But, estimating that if we were to first of all, I don't think that any attorney down there should be doing more than, say, like 4 hours a week of private practice. I mean, it should be very minimal. And nobody down there is doing that much now. So I kind of want to keep it that way. But so, if our office that we are in, that we're doing private work, is about 200 square feet, it's $12, square foot, and that comes out to about $2,400 a month. And then I just divided that by about 160 work hours in a month to get $15 an hour, and then added $1 for the utilities. So I got $16 an hour for use. So I guess my proposal would be that, as reflected in the proposed policy, that the reimbursement rate to the county would be $16 an hour for any, so if myself or any assistant does an hour of work down there, they should be sending a check to the county for $16. I'm open to hearing any feedback on that. Just trying to come up with something fair. As far as the use of equipment, that policy is already addressed in the employee handbook. So I just put in the policy that we'll follow what the employee handbook says. What else? That's about it.
And I wanted to comment that I really felt like by having data that was provided by a real estate expert, appraiser, that data was the basis for the number. So I felt like that was the best place to start.
I totally agree, and we're not trying to pull numbers out of a hat or whatever. We're trying to do right. And
does anybody have any comments about what's being proposed? And if there's no comments or edits, I would recommend that we bring this to the court on Friday as well. Rick,
Kim,
or
did you say
Chad?
4 hours a week or 4 hours a day?
A week.
A week.
Oh yeah, a day would be ridiculous. I want there to be some flexibility, I guess, but I don't think it's right to be doing more than on average 4 hours a week down there. So out of a 40-hour week, you're not doing more than like half a day. If you want to do private work at home or somewhere else outside the office, that's fine. But
I didn't know if they used it like, you do your 8 hours for you, and then after hours they spend an hour or two.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's common. I mean, it's not like you're gonna. And I think it should be clear. I'm going to say now, and it's in this policy that you should never not do your county work, because I'm doing private practice right now. Now you do that later, or don't do it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, but if you're not in the office doing it, then my view is you don't need to reimburse the county. But if you're doing the work while you're in your office, whether it's during the 9 to 5 or whether you're at 7 o'clock at night, but if you're in the office, I think you should reimburse.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I think Rick has a few.
All right, we got you now.
Very well.
We got to turn you down. We got you.
Whisper, please whisper. Whisper.
Go ahead, Rick.
Sorry about that. That was operator error earlier. My one question is, and I think you kind of talked about it, but the citizen that brought this forward, I don't recall him. One of his concerns was, and I don't recall him talking about what it actually was, but I guess he was in court or he was in mediation. I don't recall that he even said, but he was surprised to show up at whatever it was, and during the daytime, and the county attorneys or deputy county attorneys were actually who were across the table, so to speak. It was mediation. I don't know what it was. I don't know that he defined that, but does this address that, or I think we're trying to address that as well.
Without getting too specifically into that individual, I think that was an exaggeration, but in that particular instance, I think myself, Ben Willis, and Kelly Kearney were taking part in representing folks in a case in which that fellow was involved. I don't think we were ever all in court at the same time as him. I think that was during COVID, so there were some Zoom appearances and whatnot. It doesn't really address, if you're out of the office and in the courtroom, if y'all disagree, that's fine, but I wouldn't think that you would need to reimburse the county for that time, as long as you're getting your county work done. But if y'all disagree, that I'm certainly happy to hear that feedback. But that case is over, and we're trying to, moving forward, I don't anticipate a lot of those type of situations anymore.
I think that was it.
I didn't know any the details. I don't know that he really went into it.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but that was what I got out of one of his statements.
Yeah, I understand.
He felt like it was. I think he said he was shocked to see a deputy county attorney, or you. I don't remember the exact conversation, but that kind of hit me, and I kind of got what he said, but I also understand what you're saying. I also understand what the KRS allows or the statute. So I just want to bring that up. I can understand where he was coming from. I wouldn't want to show up in court one day and you're on the other side. So, but I understand also the KRS as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Rick. If there's nothing else, then we'll move on to our next item for today's discussion, and I'm going to ask Mike Hennigan to. I asked Mike because I thought it was appropriate with the two tornado shelters, severe weather shelters. I thought it'd be good to have a operations and maintenance plan for those, and this document's labeled 42 Reno Drive, but we also have the stamping ground address.
Basically, it's the same plan, just different cover pages. So
I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So basically, started out doing my due diligence, talking to the people from FEMA to make sure that all the wording was correct. These are called safe rooms, not shelters. A FEMA shelter is someplace where you provide food or a warm place, long term instead of for a couple minutes. So basically, we wrote a safe room operations plan. There are three criteria for opening this. I apologize. It's supposed to have been printed in color, but I was struggling this morning. So if a tornado watch is issued, these facilities will be unlocked and available for the community to come and go. There's not going to be anybody specifically monitoring it. There's nothing inside that you can break. It's forged steel, whatever.
The seats are steel.
Yeah.
There is in each one of them a partition that blocks off for a composting toilet.
Right. And that's something that we're going to, phase 2, we're going to talk about. In order for it to be ADA compliant, they had to install this huge restroom. It's basically like 8 feet by 12 feet, which takes an enormous amount of space out of the shelter. I'm trying to find not a loophole, but a variance where we could do, a curtained area or something. This facility is not meant for being in long term. It's for a couple of minutes while the storm is going by, making sure that you're going to survive. So if we can bring in 15, 20, 30 more people by not having this huge metal room partitioned off, it just makes more sense to me. But basically, like I said, there are three possibilities. If there's a tornado warning, we are completely locked down. Somebody from my staff or a volunteer that's been trained, and I'll get to that in a second, will be inside with the people that are being protected. They'll lock the door, hit the bank vault, the whole nine, and get them taken care of. As part of the conference that I just completed in Louisville, I've found that Weather Service is now issuing different divisions of severe thunderstorm. And that's listed in here on page 3, talking about a severe thunderstorm destructive. There's basic, which is up to 60-mile-an-hour winds, considerable, which is 70-ish miles an hour, and then if they issue it as a severe thunderstorm destructive, that's 80 miles an hour, almost 3-inch hail. It's going to cause damage to the people. So we went ahead and added that to this plan so that we're not leaving people out in the public while something that's very similar to a tornado hits. Just it's coming in straight instead of in a funnel cloud. The rest of the plan basically just lays out, how people will be notified, how our people are going to respond, and then the maintenance that's required, what we'll do quarterly, what we'll do annually, to make sure that everything works exactly when we plan it to be. Do you guys have any questions?
I know you're going to talk about this, but we talked about this when we talked about it conceptually, but I guess there was no way to put like a door that, like these exit doors that you push open, alarm goes off, just so that if there's ever an emergency, somebody can go right there and not be waiting on it to get unlocked.
Right. In order for it to be FEMA certified for EF5 225 mile an hour winds, you have to have a specific door, which, like I said, is like a bank vault. You pull a huge handle, it locks 3 bolts through the wall. You're not getting in or out until somebody slides that handle. So what we did was we put padlocks that are keyed the same as County Road Department, several other fences that we have. So department heads, sheriff deputies, there's probably 50 to 60 people that carry this key. So somebody is always going to be close, and then obviously we've got 2 weather specialists in our office that are watching. So, if I get a phone call at, 2 in the morning saying we got storms coming in, start getting ready, the first thing we're going to do is unlock those doors so that people have access, and then start moving the shelter volunteers, to monitor it. The other thing that we did, we went ahead and ordered decals for the front and back of each of these that says, if you're here and you find the door padlocked, call either the non-emergency number for 911 or our office, and those phones are answered 24 hours a day, so somebody will be dispatched over within minutes to open it up. But I think it's going to be rare that one of the citizens gets to a locked door, that we don't know in advance that there's something going on. So.
Is that?
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Does this thing have HVAC in it?
It has ventilation fans, and that's something else that I talked to the manufacturer about, because all it does is make sure that the air keeps circulating. When I walked into the Reno Drive facility the day or 2 after they installed it,
It had to be hot.
It was hot. So what they recommend is, kind of a self-contained air conditioner with the 2 tubes that come out, and there's capabilities to run those 2 tubes through ports that are pre-installed by the manufacturer.
Along the bottom of this, every so many feet, there's just a screened opening at the base.
Right.
That's like that wide and that tall. It's probably every 6 feet, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's, that's what is designed. It's designed to help air flow.
Exactly.
You shut that door with 90 people in there, it's going to get hot.
It's going to get hot quick, exactly. But they do have a method for
You're
making.
talking, if they're in there, you're talking about a storm situation where the temperature drops.
Yes.
And the wind is blowing. So there's going to be I don't know, and you're only talking a few minutes too, typically.
Right. But the thought was,
I get it, though.
yeah, the thought was to
You
come up
sweat it out of
with
10
some
minutes.
sort of method to condition the air. If we pre-staged a base next to the solar panels and were able to put a generator that we could bolt down and then run those tubes, so that we can get it a little bit more comfortable. But basically, the answer to most of your questions is we've only owned them for 90 days. We don't know what we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So,
here's the conditions that it's going to be opened.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to open it? And we've talked about that. The next piece I was going to ask is like, how are we going to communicate this option and this opportunity for folks in the location?
Our reverse 911 system, the manufacturer, the company has been sold. So I'm working with, to get new parameters on the reverse 911. People will be notified by social media, reverse 911, either a push notification or a text message. Yeah, we're going to have 3 or 4 different methods to make sure. And the other thing is that, you know, all of the criteria for us opening this stimulates a WIA announcement by the National Weather Service. So you're going to get that annoying cell phone message from the Weather Service saying that, you know, these conditions have been met. And we can do a public safety campaign saying, if you get this message from the Weather Service saying severe thunderstorm destructive, you know, these facilities are open now. You know, it's just a given. The other thing what we're doing, working with the Red Cross, they're going to provide a training program. It's the same training program that they do for their shelter volunteers, and they're going to put some of our people through that so that they could either be deployed as a Red Cross volunteer, but more importantly, they've got all of the training, you know, so that we get, you know, retirees and people that just want to help with the community but don't want to be first responders. So a pool of 20 or 25 people that would be available. You know, we tell them the day in advance that we think this is coming. You know, please be ready to go to these places. So.
Any questions or comments?
Could we do like an open house at these 2 locations and maybe have some pamphlets ready available so that we can hand out to the folks that would know? Because like down Stamp Ground, y'all know the trailer parks done been hit twice by tornadoes. Most of those folks don't even know it's there yet.
Right.
I mean, I try to tell them as much as I can.
Yeah. No, I think it's something we could schedule this fall.
We got to let them know.
And maybe we could send a postcard, you know, to
people
within that area that
yeah.
said, you know.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
That's a possibility too. We could definitely do that.
I don't know what all it's on.
Like the bat light?
I was thinking like fire departments, when not all of them, but some they leave. You know, there's a red light comes on. You know they're not there. I just think opposite.
Well,
the
one in Stamping Ground's down behind the ambulance station, so you really don't even notice it. So a light would probably be a good idea.
Yeah,
let's talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Dave's going to be out there with a flashlight.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to talk about there?
Not shelter related. I do have another piece of business.
All right.
As I mentioned real quickly, Regina and I spent the last week in Louisville at the Kentucky Emergency Services Conference. The conclusion of that yesterday was the awards banquet, and both Regina and I received Certified Kentucky Emergency Management certification.
Well, congratulations. Thank you for your efforts.
There are a total of 21 people in the state that have achieved that credential. It's essentially a PhD of emergency management, so we're pretty proud that we both got it this year, and you know we're able to provide these services back to the community.
So is it now Dr. Hennigan? Is that
Please,
what we should?
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Dr. Wallace, do you have any comment on that? I knew it. Thanks, Mike. JR, can you share a little update? We talked about Triport Road and then also the paving job out at 2200 Cincinnati Pike.
Yes. The $480,000 funding that we received from the state for Triport Road will begin on the 23rd of this month. And it's going to be a great improvement to all them people out there. So I talked to Toyota Two-Show. I think Judge Covington and Jack Connor's going to alert everybody else out there that this is going on. But Two-Show has agreed to open the back entrance if there's any issues where they could get out, people could get out on Rogers Gap Road and not be a traffic jam out there. And I think it'll take about a week to complete since that's
like 2 days of milling, 3 days of paving. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
they're also going to put up an electric
flashing billboards
that notifies
to alert everybody a week or so before, according to Hamilton Hinkle. And Monday, Chief Ward, they're going to start on the paving out at the back entrance to the fire department, down to the produce building that we talked about 3 weeks ago. And then while they're down there, they're going to go ahead and pave in front of his new palace out there, his new metal building. So no mobilization fees, do it all of 2 jobs and 1 mobilization. Another great thing that I saw yesterday, I was out to EMS building on Lexus Way. Fiscal was out there running water lines. Davis H. Elliott had crews out there setting poles for the electric. So that's coming together wonderful.
That's awesome to hear that.
Yeah, we've been waiting on that for what, 3 months, Judge?
Yeah,
Or 4
I mean,
months?
we have made a bunch of calls, and JR has been very helpful, and appreciate your efforts there, JR. And you know, JR's out there across from the new sheriff's office project, and I was there last night or the day before, and there's still looks like it's it's came quite a far, you know, it came quite a business in a short time. And,
the last 2 weeks, major things has happened out there.
Great weather too.
Yeah.
Great weather. Something
Yes,
kind of,
you get in out
or
there.
As far as dry weather.
I roll in at 7 o'clock in the morning, so there's people always on job
So
working.
there's been a big change there, and then
striping. Me and you still need to get together on
we
striping.
need to get together on that. I know you've had your hands full with
on the Betsy Way.
Yeah, on
Yes.
Betsy Way.
Yeah.
And
And
I
then
think what they sent was fine, but I need to look at it again.
Then down here, they finished pouring the pads. The pads are all complete, and then there's a utility wall that's a brick wall at one end. That's where all the utilities will be. That's complete, and steel. There's been more steel delivered. I'm very hopeful that they'll start putting steel up. And what the guy said several times, Ian is his name.
Yes.
That once that steel, once they start going up, he thinks that will not be a long drawn out process. He thinks the steel will go up pretty well, pretty quick. So, we can push that along to get that parking lot back open. But I think what's held them up is the powder coating of the
Powder
steel.
coating of the steel frames.
Yeah. And they
Yes.
actually came back and wanted us to not powder coat, but powder coat's the best way to go. And that's what we ended up getting. So that's going
You
on
wait
there.
a few weeks to gain a few years.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Really.
So that's exciting news. And any of our anybody have any additional information? JR, thank you. Anybody have any additional information for the court?
Justice Building, is it, are they going to start on it?
Yeah. AOC.
We broke ground.
I haven't seen it.
Dug a really mighty little tiny ditch.
The first thing that's going to happen is the sewer line that's going to go down Cooper Alley is going to close Cooper Alley, and then rerouting the stormwater. And I'll check with them today and ask them when they're just waiting on AOC. Trace Creek is chomping at the bit.
Like contract type stuff?
It's just finalizing all the contracts, and
Jeez.
I mean, we're beholden to their process.
Wait a few months to gain a few.
I don't deal with KDE. I deal with
So,
whoever I deal with.
but no, they're chomping at the bit. I will share that we had a Cooper Alley, a property owners meeting last week, and then all the subs were here last week as well as a kickoff meeting, and I was very pleased that we took the time to invite all the property owners to walk through the process and then give people contact numbers, so if they have a question or if they have a problem, and the property owners voiced, hey, we appreciate you all doing this. So that was a positive thing.
Cooper's Alley one way, right?
That's the city has discussed that. I don't think it's been finalized. So if any court member has anything, short-term rentals. I'm about to walk off without that. Well, we beat this short-term rental thing up and down, and the only thing that I really would like to talk about possibly changing in our current ordinance, I think we have a good ordinance. I think our individuals had a terrible situation. I think it was an outlier. Do we want to do something to try to help that from happening again? The only thing I know and recommend that comes to the top of my list is limiting occupancy to 2 per bedroom plus 2. And that would be something that I think would be a positive. I would love to hear from you all and then try to put this to bed. I mean, does anybody have any hard recommendations other than that? And as you heard from Lori, I think we have a good ordinance. Kelly?
Well, I'll just say I do like that idea, 2 per bedroom plus 2, and that at least would keep large parties from forming. And I don't know, we've talked about it, how do you enforce it? And unfortunately, neighbors are going to have to call sheriff's office or police department, go down and check it out. And they'll just have to write a report, and just something we have to monitor.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if it needs to be in the ordinance so people can find it or what, but it seems like from everything we've heard, there's a disconnect between the sheriff or police going out in this report and code enforcement, who ultimately is responsible for it. Like, the information is not getting from one to the other. And I don't know how people learn about that process. Like, hey, we have this issue, can you follow up on it, code enforcement? Like, how would they know that there's these issues? So
right now, we speak to Sam all the time if he requests us usually, but we could probably create some kind of form or something with code enforcement between us and GPD that we could just share if we run into a situation like that, or if we find out something that we need to relay. Typically, we'll call him if we see some issue, but it's probably something we just.
But if we could formally put something as a procedure in place outside the ordinance, that doesn't need to be in the ordinance. But if we could put something in procedure, that would help.
It could just be as simple as an email
to
Sam or something.
Yeah.
And just since we're on the topic, and you tell me, because I think it's hard to enforce. You go knock on a door, you're not going to ask everybody to come out and count heads. I mean, it's hard to know.
I mean, you do go into some places, like when the paddocks were there, you go in and there would be 10 people in some rooms, and obviously that's not
right.
But we don't have that issue right now, luckily. But there are still some houses out in the county that are smaller, some areas you walk into and you end up with a ton of people there. Your issue is going to be, they're just here for a few hours, or how do you identify whether they're actually staying.
Right.
But it's still something we could notify code enforcement if we believe that they are staying there, and they could follow up.
Well, I think that'd be really helpful, because I know it's a unique individual. Each situation's different, and we're just trying, like you said, keep stuff from getting out of control.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we'll bring that then if there's nothing else. If anybody else has anything, otherwise we'll.
Hey, Judge.
Hey, Rick Hostetler. Yes, sir.
Just wondering if you have an update on, railroad crossings for Charter Spectrum. Anything going on with that?
So we continue to meet every Tuesday. 3 of the 7 permits have been approved. Work has been done on 2 of the 3, I believe. They're still like talking to rail pros every other day or so, but I do not have any additional information about anything that's been approved. I will say this, that I have connected in an effort to try to be a problem solver. I have connected Robert Swanigan and AMK. They are utilizing something called Crayley fiber, which is through the water lines, and I believe Charter Spectrum has shared the locations of these crossings with Robert Swanigan and AMK to look and see if there's any nearby water lines that could serve as just a fix. And I've told Spectrum that we know that this is a nationwide problem. It's just not our problem. And that if that was a solution that they could use in the future and not have to go through this long drawn-out delay, then it would be a positive thing. And I've shared that also on my NTIA grant calls with the federal representatives on those grant calls. So, you know, I've talked to Senator McConnell's office, I've talked to Andy Barr's office, I've talked to the governor's office for broadband deployment. The railroad is an entity to itself, and they work on their own timetable. And I wish I had a better answer, but it's not for lack of effort. I'll promise you that, brother. Yeah. With that said, we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you all. Hey, Mark and Mike and
Johnny brought it to me too.
Y'all got just a second?
Yeah. He works for that company now.